Tony Christian, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Beautiful 84 Firebird in the far lane. Of course, that's a Camaro from Texas in the near lane. Tony Christian cut a beautiful line off the starting line. This could be the upset of the day in Pro Stock. No, the wind lights say Bruce Allen at 760, 177 miles an hour. Tony Christian ran a 7.72, but was a lot closer to Allen than he should have been, Brock.
He sure was, Steve, and in fact had top speed on Bruce by 180 miles an hour. There you see a little wheel stand on a part of Tony Christian, but he gets it all gathered up and really gives Bruce Allen everything he wanted in that race, and almost a little bit too much.
I'll tell you, keep your eye on the man driving that red car. He's going to go someplace if he sticks with professional drag racing. A native of Minnesota who a few years ago moved from Freedley, Minnesota to Duluth, Georgia. And Brock, there were a lot of jokes floating around in the pro stock ranks about how he picked up 0.3 of a second just by moving to stock car country in Georgia.
Well, whatever it is, he's got one of the fastest pro stock cars in the business. This is going to be a race.
What a lead. It looked like one clutch was released. They moved at exactly the same time. It is Glidden. Oh, boy. I'll tell you, the North Star National's not disappointing anybody. That was Bob Glidden's two boys, Billy and Rusty, high-fiving it. A 7:57 for Glidden at 183 miles an hour to Johnson, 7:60, 300ths of a second separating them.
Boy, I thought the race between Christian and Allen was close, but wait till you see this one. Notice the crewman of Bob Glidden already jumping up. He's celebrating because Glidden left so well, squeezed the light perfectly, and I think that was what spelled the difference, Steve.
Well, you know, Brock, the officials tell us from the NHRA timing tower the reaction times were identical. So you're seeing a realistic 300ths of a second. That's what it looks like.
Bruce Allen near lane, Butch Leal in the far lane. Pontiac versus Chevrolet. And it is Butch Leal off the starting line first. It's a close race in the middle of the course. Bruce Allen trying to pull back, but it's Butch Leal by a fender length at the finish line, winning the race, 7.54 seconds. His speed 183 miles an hour, and Leal with the Pontiac Firebird moves into the finals. As we look at the start again, Butch Leal had the advantage by 0.02 of a second. And it's a good thing for Leal because Bruce Allen's car actually ran the quarter mile quicker. Both lanes on the racetrack are timed separately, and in this case, it's a good thing because you can see the difference between the two cars. That 0.02 of a second advantage off the starting line was actually just a couple of feet at the finish line for Butch Leal.
Well, for years we've been saying how quick Butch Leal is off the starting line. It paid off again. You had 200ths in the bank, and you needed it. He ran 200ths quicker.
Oh, yeah, it was the greatest race. Bruce is always there every time, and I told him last year, I said, you beat me every time I race you, my year this year. And
Simple sport, but one that is complex indeed. Here are some very sophisticated race cars in the lengthening shadows at Maple Grove Raceway. Bruce Allen in the far lane, the surprising Don Beverly in the near lane. Our Pro Stock final, Pontiac versus Chevrolet. The two cars finally staged, and it's an advantage to Allen, but Don Beverly isn't giving any quarter. Beverly charges on in the near lane. It's an upset. Don Beverly wins the race. His elapsed time, 7.54 seconds. The crew overjoyed. Bruce Allen was close at a 7.57 seconds. 0.03 of a second at the finish line at the start. Bruce Allen had a 0.02 of a second advantage as he left the starting line ahead of Don Beverly. But that very sophisticated Pontiac Firebird of Beverly pulled ahead right at the end of the quarter-mile race course, and by a matter of inches, won the race. Don Beverly, the first time ever a Pro Stock championship in his garage.
Don Beverly, this has got to be one of the biggest upsets in Pro Stock in many, many years. A fine drive, a 754 beat a 757. It's got to feel wonderful.
Well, it was a good run. Bruce does a great job. He's a good guy to race. True champion. The Rhea Morrison team's great.
You know, Bruce told me, he said, Beverly's a real calm guy. You're incredibly calm for what you've accomplished today.
Well, I'll tell you, it's maybe I haven't thought about it enough yet, but it's maybe it'll get to me in a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. And for my team, Randy Smith and Cliff Hughes and Boney and Mike and everybody, we went this race last year, which we just got started, and it's to go this far, it's really great.
So this is really the anniversary of your first year in Pro Stock, and what a way to celebrate it.
I appreciate that a whole bunch.
What a job this fella did. He better be today, Paul, because Bob Glidden comes to the line with a performance edge. He has run consistently quicker than the driver in the near lane. It's Ford in the far lane. It is Pontiac in the near lane. Two veteran drivers. Butch Leal has been in this category since about 1970. They're stage ready. Leal is off the mark first. Look at Leal. He's got a car length lead. But here comes Glidden alongside. Glidden and Leal side by side. The win goes to Butch Leal. His 752, a good deal slower than Glidden's 745. But the whole shot pays off for Butch Leal. Wow.
Watch the white car on the left side of your screen. He roars off the line, cut an incredible light against Bob Glidden, and that made the difference in victory, despite the fact that Glidden was faster through the quarter mile. Coming to the end now, you see Glidden roaring, trying to catch up, but he cannot get the job done. So Butch Leal moves ahead, and right now, he's in the shutdown area with Steve.
The master of the hole shot has struck again. Butch, your 752 beat his 745. He's stunned.
Oh, it was coming. I watched him all the way down. About third gear, he started coming, and I said, come on, baby, hold him off. And, you know, Bob had a little trouble here at this race, and he worked real hard to get ready for this last round, and his car worked evidently a lot better. And, you know, once in a while you catch them when they work real hard off guard, and I tried the best I could, and evidently it pulled off this time.
Yeah, well, you can bet the Florida fans are really pulling for Christian.
A slight advantage to Tony Christian off the mark. He gets a little out of the groove. The car starts to skate around at the finish line. Oh, boy. Talk about true squeakers. It is Kenny Delco. 740. A tremendous elapsed time over a losing 743 for Tony Christian, even though he got a bit out of shape.
Watch the front end on Tony Christian's car come up as he gets the starting line advantage. But the same thing happens to him that happened to Cartier earlier as a car moves over to the left and gets out of the groove, allowing Delco to pull ahead just about enough to win by a foot.
So Kenny Delco takes the win, and at this moment, he's at the far end with Steve Evans.
Well, this has been a very special racing day so far for Kenny Delco. Kenny, first you got around Bob Glidden in round one, and now a 740 disposes of Tony Christian.
Oh, wow, I can't believe it. We've been running real good lately, you know, with Bob Engel's motors and his Jerry Haas chassis. And these Pontiac Trans Ams just run, you know.
That's
fast.
the quickest elapsed time of the round.
Yeah, I think I know the secret.
Okay, hang on to it.
Okay. See you next round, Al.
Yeah, he's not going to share that speed secret.
Watch the light. The revs come up. They inch forward. And now they watch for a yellow and then a green. And there it is. They're running.
An obvious hole shot by Butch Leal. That breach in the holster has worked again. Oh, but Bruce Allen powers by the win. Buddy Morris and David Greer, who owned the car, celebrating a 736. But that's what it took, Don Gurlitz, to beat Leal's 741.
Watch Leo as he leaves the line. Obviously out in front of Bruce Allen, but he doesn't stay there all that long as Bruce Allen's power pulls right up on him and powers by him. I don't think that Leo was ready for a 736.
Bruce Allen out of the Chevy Beretta, the Gator Nationals champion. Butch appeared to leave first, but you'll like this number, 736. Horsepower prevails.
The rear Morrison guys make some power. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for that, Butch, I mean, what a guy you're racing. The guy goes out there and leaves on me almost every time. I mean, you need a new driver. We said before, more power or a new driver, and they gave me some power, so I got some reprieve.
And if there's a driver here today that can lead with Butch Leal, it's young Kenny Delco from Center Reach, New York. It is Leal again out front. Leal, but this time by only 0.02 of a second. Is that going to be enough? It is Leal. It is Leal. No! It is Kenny Delco from behind. 750 to a 752. Theoretically, the dead heat. 181 miles per hour from Kenny Delco.
As they leave the line, Butch Leal again gets that patented Leo leave, but he couldn't get enough to hold off the strong charge of Kenny Delco's 750. You know, Steve, you can only leave so early and you'll get a red light, and of course Butch knows that. So you only got so much. You can see Delco moves out in front just a little bit.
But that little bit was just enough. So now
500 cubic inches running on racing gasoline, utilizing two 4-barrel carburetors. These cars weigh no less than 2,350 pounds with the driver on board. Highly sophisticated racing machines. A great start for both men. Evenly matched. And it is Bruce Allen by a couple of inches. 7.50 seconds. His speed over 186 miles an hour. That is one of the closest races you'll ever see. As we look again in slow motion, both drivers react at the same time to the green light. As they moved down the racetrack, neither Allen nor Ekman had been able to pull out a lead until the last few hundred feet of this quarter mile. Then Bruce Allen used the power of that Chevrolet Beretta to pull a win of only inches over Jerry Ekman. The time difference, 1/1000th of a second.
You know, we've often said that NHRA Championship drag racing offers the closest competition in all of motorsports. How about a race, Bruce Allen, that you won by 1/1000th of a second?
That was a close race. I tell you, Levi Garrett Chevrolet came through. It was pure horsepower. Jerry's a...
Here comes Jerry Ekman. That's okay, Jerry. A 750 for both of you guys. Great race.
I've lost by less than 100th lately.
That one you lost by 1,000.
That's the story of my life. I don't mind losing to a gentleman like this, but I'm just getting tired of losing.
Okay, Jerry Ekman, a great sport. Bruce Allen, a great drive.
Bruce Allen in the near lane. Larry Morgan in the far lane. And Larry Morgan's got one of those great starts. Bruce Allen's got to make up a lot of distance. And he does by just inches. Bruce Allen goes into the finals 7.47 seconds, 100th quicker than Morris Johnson Jr. Bruce Allen earns the right to the lane choice, but most importantly, he defeats Larry Morgan in this semifinal race. As we watch again, Larry Morgan had the advantage at the start by nearly 5/100ths of a second. But the power of Bruce Allen's Chevrolet began to make itself felt at half-track as they came to the first timing light. 66 feet ahead of the finish line, they were dead even. In that 66-foot distance, Bruce Allen moved ahead by just inches to defeat Morgan.
Butch is taking his time staging, even though Frank Iaconio had rushed up and put on both his yellow lights trying to confuse Leo or possibly hurry him. It has not worked with this veteran driver. Leo finally bumps into the beams, and it is Leo away first, as he always seems to be. Leo and Iaconio, what a drag race this is. Oh, my. Butch Leo at a 750 defeats Frank Iaconio's quicker 746. Don Garlitz, he's done it again.
Watch that leave, Steve. Is he incredible? Almost immediately, he's got a half a car advantage. And they move down the track, and you think he's just going to completely pull away. But Iaconio begins to make some power, and watch him close it up. Well, if they'd have had another 66 feet to go, they'd have probably beat him. And Butch Leo advances.
I guess it's just the many years of racing that Butch Leo always seems to know when you need a distinctive starting line advantage. He ran 746, you ran 750, you go to the semis.
That's great, Steve. We finally got this Trans Am Pontiac running pretty well, and I made a lane choice there, and obviously it wasn't the right one. I ran 48 the run before, and I guess a 50 then.
You can get back in the 40s?
I think so. It spun awful hard on the starting line, and we're going to go for it, so It looked like to me that he got by me. That's how hard he was moving.
No.
And, well, that's the way it goes. And Frankie's a good racer. And I think he was one of the best left. And we'll find out what happens from here on.
Okay. Iaconio moving up the stage didn't bother Butch Leo one bit.
That racket you all hear in the background is the semifinals of Pro Stock. You remember Tony Christian, after his second round win, says, I hope I get to race Butch Leo. Well, he gets his wish. There is Butch Leo in the far lane of the Trans Am, Tony Christian in the near lane of the Chevrolet Beretta. They are both ready to go, and it is Leo reacting first, but only by 2/100ths of a second. Tony Christian is right there with Butch Leo. It is Butch Leo. They run identical elapsed times, 7:48 apiece, but Leo's slight starting line advantage wins it for him.
Well, if Christian didn't believe that Leo was a lever, he knows it now, because this is what won the race. It was who left that starting line first. Both cars were almost identical in mile per hour, ET, everything, but that tiny little starting line advantage that Leo picked up, 2/100ths, made the difference at the end. And what this proves, nobody has a car that's so good you can afford to get sloppy at the starting line. Steve with Butch.
Need I ask if that was close? Both of you ran 748.
Oh, I couldn't tell who won. We were looking at each other. Once we get in high gear, you can turn and look, Steve. And I'm sitting there looking at Tony, and I said,
go, baby. I said, let's get this Pontiac. I said, I wanted to thump that Chevy. You know, he's made the comment about thumping Glidden, thumping Fords, and I said, let's get that Beretta, you know. And so Pontiac got another Beretta again, so I feel good about it, and I'm sure Pontiac will too.
Well, speaking of Pontiac, Steve, we're fixing to watch two more of them do battle in just a moment.
We are indeed. There is Mark Powick. Powick will be over in the far lane. In the near lane is the black and silver car of Morris Johnson Jr. In just one season, he's become a name to reckon with. Powick with a Butch Leal quality lead. Powick with the advantage based on the start. Morris Johnson Jr. comes around. This Pro Stock racing is unbelievable. Johnson wins it with a 744 to a losing 752, but Mark Powick was in it all the way, Don.
Oh, I mean, did he get a leave on him or what? It looked to me like he'd never be able to make it up. But the Morris Johnson Jr. power began to pay off, and he gathered up just a little bit of that advantage that Powick had from the starting line. By the time they got to three-quarters, they must have been side by side, and as they went into the traps, he put a couple of inches on him to win the race.
Bruce Allen has retained his quick lane. He stayed in the far lane of the track, putting Bob over here in the lane nearest the camera. Our onboard camera riding with Bob Glidden, and as you watch him, you can see the concentration that a driver goes through, trying to gain an advantage at the start. The 500 cubic inch engines leave the starting line at about 8,500 RPM. Glidden is ready. And looking on from the far end as Bruce Allen beats Bob Glidden. The elapsed times identical. 7.43 seconds. Just
that was a drag race there, I'm telling you. No idea who won. Could have just as easily been Bob. I mean, that was just side by side the whole way. Great race.
As they always are when that Ford meets the Chevrolet.
I'm telling you, it pumps us both up, I think. We don't especially want to race each other, but we always have good races, and can you say about Bob? I mean, man.
He says a lot of nice things about you, too, believe me, and Etta as well, who's down here.
When he needs to, he puts it together. He's a guy that can get it done. Get over here.
I'll tell you, Fred, the Chief Auto Parts Winter Nationals fans here at Pomona love the Pro Stock cars. It's the product identity, but also the closeness of the competition. Johnson far lane, Allen near lane. It's Johnson who wins the reaction time war. Into high gear. Oh, it is Allen by inches. A 7:34 to a 7.36 second elapsed time.
but he's got a tough competitor. Bruce Allen on all General Motors vinyl. Pontiac versus Chevrolet Beretta. Perfect start. Dead even. Photo finish. It is Ekman. Identical elapsed times. Identical speeds.
Identical times, identical speeds. Well, then how do you determine who wins, Don?
Well, it wasn't quite identical. There was a 1/1000th difference between these two cars, so Ekman needed that starting line advantage to make the determination. The car did have a tiny bit more performance than Allen, but not really hardly enough to win the race. But in a race that's as close as this, it takes those photo finish lights to make the determination.
So when we carry it out, yet another digit, Jerry Ekman, 7.338. Bruce Allen, 7.339. Bill Ordorf and his wife sharing a difficult day together. The death of her brother this morning and then the victory in the race. Now Steve is with Jerry Ekman.
Absolutely one of the finest Pro Stock final rounds we have ever witnessed, and here's the victor.
Oh, thanks, Steve. First of all, I got to say I want to dedicate this race to Jimmy Watson, who passed away this morning. One of our big fans, Bill's wife's brother.
Did you know you'd won?
I knew I won. I knew it was close. I could see Bruce with me all the way, but when we started getting into high gear, I saw it coming, and I thought, here it is. And I'm so grateful that Penzo and Pontiac both had the confidence to stick with us through our lean times, because we're winners now. We're here.
I'll second that. Everybody down here will. That's right. He absolutely out-muscled Bob Glidden, and few have done that. Just about ready, the Pro Stock final. Finally, Morgan inches in. It's Alderman away first. Alderman with 300s in the bank. Not enough.
Larry Morgan at 7:27 has won the Pro Stock final. His crew celebrates, his wife, the baby, everybody very happy here at Memphis. Alderman at 7:30, both ran 1:89. What a classic final, Don.
Well, this is why the fans love Pro Stock. They don't crackle and pop like fuelers, but they make up for it in that side-by-side racing. Alderman almost put enough in the bank at the starting line to win the race, but just by inches loses. What a race.
Larry, I'm so happy Morgan has won the Mid-South Nationals in fine fashion at a 7:27.
Thank God. Man, am I happy. I couldn't be any happier. Let me tell you something, Steve. You know, the last one was for Pinellas, but my wife and little boy got to come to this, and I couldn't be any happier. I have to thank Castro Oldsmobile, Jim Oliver, my engine builder, Andy Maddox, my head porter, Gary Pierman, Tom Roberts, everybody around, all my sponsors. Thank God for this, and I'm happy.
Which was your favorite 7 dwarf?
I don't want to say.
Happy would be my guess.
Happy. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Well, he's going to need some big horsepower because Darrell Alderman's 500 cubic inch 440 Dodge really makes some muscle.
Yes, it does, but not as consistently as they would like. Dodge versus Olds. That's the Olds on the far lane. The green and white car of Larry Morgan. Oh, who wins it? Electronically, it's judged Darrell Alderman. Alderman runs a 7:35, but Morgan had the best reaction time of his life, runs a 7:40 and makes it look like a dead heat.
What a starting line advantage Morgan takes. He was figuring on some horsepower out of that Dodge, so he figured he's going to have to make it right at the starting line. And he took a lead that was unbelievable. I bet Alderman watched his car halfway down the track before he started to pull ahead. Right about there, the Dodge starts to make a move, and he gets out in front just by a whisker to win the race.
I'm sure I won't have to tell Darrell Alderman how close that one was.
That was a close race. Larry's always real close, Steve.
Even closer than the elapsed times might indicate it. You're 35 to his 40.
Yeah, he must have got me a little bit on the starting line then.
35. Those numbers could win this race.
Yeah, I hope we can run a 35 throughout the race. Maybe we will be in the winner's circle.
Buster Couch up there saying, guys, let's get staged up here. Have you noticed we can start to see the stars? Huh?
Well, at least we'll be able to see Ekman's car. It's bright yellow. Alderman's, well, he's red and white, going to blend into the crowd here, the landscape. This is really starting to get real dark. Here we go. We're ready. Pro Stock final.
RPM's up. This is for all the money in the Winston Point. It's a great start. It's a great race. And it belongs to Jerry Ekman. 7:32 to a 7:35, even though Alderman maybe got away first. We'll look at the replay in a bit. But it's Ekman going to the winner's circle for the second consecutive NHRA national event.
Alderman, in fact, did get away first. He took a nice starting line advantage, and it looked like if he had maintained the performance that we'd seen earlier, he would have been an easy winner. But something happened right about here in the race course, and Alderman's car fell off just a little bit. And that's all that Ekman needed to put his car out in front. They both ran the same speed, 186 miles an hour. But that little distance that Ekman picked up allowed him to win the race by inches.
Jerry Ekman saying, did I win that? I tell you what, Steve, that had to be close. Continue the thought.
It was close, huh?
Oh, boy, you don't know.
No, I don't.
We wouldn't be here if you didn't win.
Oh, great. What can I say, Steve? This makes 2 in a row. Like I said before here, there's a lane on each side of the track, and we got one of them, and I guess it was good enough to get down the track. I got to thank my sponsors, Pennzoil and Pontiac. John Waldy at Stratford Motor Products is our home track here in Canada. I'm excited.
Larry Morgan was coming into this round with a 7:31, and Ekman had run a 7:46 in the previous round. He had to do something.
Larry Morgan, the defending U.S. Nationals champion, trying to make it 2 in a row. It is Ekman. Jerry Ekman has stunned this crowd. 7:35 for both drivers. Car owner Bill Orndorff in the black hat has gone crazy. And why not? It's the first U.S. Nationals victory for owner and driver.
It's not often that you reach down into the bag of tricks and pull out a winner at the U.S. Nationals, and that's just what they did. The crew installed a different engine, matched the performance of Larry Morgan, and the driver, Jerry Ekman, did his job on the starting line, and that tells the story.
Here again, graphically displayed, is the importance of a good start. Morgan's ET was 1,000ths quicker, yet Jerry Ekman was the winner. And he's with Steve.
You took a gamble. You took the motor out. There was nothing wrong with it, and you tried another engine.
Right. I certainly did. It was quite a gamble because we'd been having problems earlier in the round, and we just didn't know, and we figured we need some more performance for the final. Looks like it paid off. It was a good guess.
Congratulations, U.S. Nationals champion.
Excellent. My dream come true.
Warren Johnson is ready. The RPMs are up. Alderman's in. Let's just watch it. Now that's pro stock racing. Darrell Alderman had to overcome a whole shot from Warren Johnson. He whips him with a 7:31 to a 7:34, but the best driving we've seen from Warren Johnson in a long time. Even his son Kurt is smiling, though they didn't win it.
Well, when we watch the replay, we can see that Warren Johnson cut Darrell no slack whatsoever on that starting line. If he could have just held the performance of that Oldsmobile up, he could have easily won this race. And that's evidenced by the fact that he is still well ahead of that Dodge at the halfway mark in this race. But as they neared the finish line, the power of the Mopar began to come on, and he pulled right up to dead even. And it's remarkable that he was able to catch Warren Johnson with the type of starting line advantage that he took off the line. Let's take a look at the numbers. Remember, a .400 is a perfect light. Johnson has a .439 and a .473 for Alderman. But that 7:31 ET made up the difference, which was 1,000th of a second.
You know, you've seen a good drag race when the first two words the winner says is, who won? Warren Johnson over to congratulate Darrell Alderman. That's 2 in a row.
Hey, I knew when Warren and I got beside each other it was going to be one heck of a drag race. And, of course, I wanted to win, but I wanted to be a good race for the fans, too.
You were moments away. Who do you pick, Big Daddy?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, Warren Johnson has got the performance advantage. And I got another thing. Alderman has won too much. That makes it a little bit against him in odds.
All right, here they go. Alderman away first. You're riding with the whole shot. It's not enough. Warren Johnson has won it from behind in what may be the closest side-by-side race in the history of drag racing. Johnson 7:27, Alderman 7:31, but Alderman a 4.2 like Johnson a 4.5. Do the math, less than 1,000th of a second separated these two cars.
An unbelievable race. Darrell Alderman takes a very decided hole shot, starting line, whatever you want to call it, advantage, but he cannot hold off Johnson's mid-range charge, where he makes up that difference and actually holds on to just the ever so slightest margin of victory. And there you have it, Johnson the winner.
The margin of victory was so small, yet this man, you knew you won, Warren.
Yeah, I saw the light just as it crossed the line.
You're looking at the wind light at almost 200 miles an hour?
Well, you know, you got a little time in there.
You have stopped the streak of the Dodge, and you're going to get a lot of pats on the back from the Gliddens of the world, too.
I think this is all for the rest of the races. Everybody was red lighting, I mean, doing everything that could possibly go wrong for them, and I think this is for the rest of the race, because we knew we could do it, and I think the other racers now are going to finally say that, hey, he puts his pants on the same way as we do, too.
Scott Jeffrion has already been in one final this year. He lost to Darrell Alderman in the Dodge in Houston, but I agree with you, Big Daddy. This is a pick-em special here. Jeffrion last to stage. Oh, yeah. You bet. Ekman by a whisker. 7:32 to a 7:33. 187 to 188. Wow.
Unbelievable that two cars so different, two different drivers, could leave the line so close together with the tiniest of margins, 0.006 of a second advantage going to Jeffrion. But it wasn't enough. He needed a 0.007 advantage, because when they got to the end, there was only 1,000th of a second separating these two cars. And the 7:33 with a 3 was all it took for Jeffrey to lose. If that had been a 7:33 with a 2, he'd have probably won.
Jerry Ekman says that had to be close. Close is not the word. How about 1/1000th of a second?
I'll take that, as long as it's in my favor.
You didn't know you'd won.
No, absolutely not. I knew he was right there with me, and he has a little more steam in high gear. When he got into high gear, I saw him moving, and boy, that speed, Steve, you don't know anything. But I'll take that win.
One thing I know, the fans are loving it. It's Ford versus General Motors. Bob Glidden, the only competitive Ford Pro Stocker in the sport. Oh, yes. Rusty Glidden says, go Bob, then go he did. They both run 7.26 seconds, but it is Glidden with the win by 5/1000. When you consider the whole shot, it was only 2/100ths of the difference at the finish line.
Glidden makes a beautiful start. Look at that Ford pullout in front of that Oldsmobile in that initial run. Now down course, Johnson does make a little bit more power and run a little better top speed, but he was never able to make up the difference. They both run 7:26, and it was the starting line advantage that won the race.
Amato. Here is Darrell Alderman. He's completed his burnout. It's not a California fog that has rolled inside the Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona. This is his opponent, Larry Morgan, at the wheel of Bob Pinella's Castrol GTX Oldsmobile. Morgan has the lane choice. He has selected the lane nearest the camera. But while Alderman won in that lane, the far side of the track in the previous round, he still is not happy with it because of the bump. All over the lane is Darrell Alderman. You saw the driving job he did, and it was enough to keep him ahead of Larry Morgan. An upset victory as Darrell Alderman goes to the winner's circle in Pro Stock Eliminator. His elapsed time, 7.30 seconds. And once again, he rose to the occasion with the reaction time he needed. As we watch in replay, he got off the starting line nearly 6/100ths of a second quicker than Morgan. His elapsed time as they headed down the racetrack was only 7.30. Morgan was much quicker and nearly 2 miles an hour faster at a 7:25, 191.85. The margin of victory, only 0.05 of a second. That's close racing. Let's go down to the far end of the racetrack and join Steve Evans with our champion.
Well, that's why they pay you the big bucks. You know that?
Well, I'll tell you, that was really a close race there. I knew I was going to have to be on time against Larry. And
you had your back against the wall a little bit.
I definitely did, and went out there in second gear, and it got to moving around a little bit with me, and he started easing back on me on the other end. We're just very fortunate to win.
Well, your 7:30 beat his 7:25. You won this one for the team.
Well, I like to win that way. I'd like to dedicate this race to Dave Hutchins. He's 39 today, and thank my sponsors, Mopar, Dodge Motorsports.
Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.
David Hutchins, the co-crew chief on that Dodge Daytona. Larry Morgan coming over to offer his congratulations to Darrell Alderman. A brilliant driving job by Alderman. That's also why he has got such a whopping lead in the Winston Points Championship. He has won 7 races this year.
Well, on Johnson's trip up the return road, you can bet he'll be glancing over at this car because he owns it. That is Scott Jeffrey, on 25 years old, from Huntington Beach, California, and he is up against a total professional. Bruce Allen and Herrera Morrison, Chevy Beretta. Bruce Allen from Arlington, Texas, plays a big part of the preparation of this car, not only driving it, so he has an intimate relationship with the machine. Got Jeffrey on, he leads the preparation up to Kurt Johnson, Warren Son. They're based in Sugar Hill, Georgia. Okay, the RPM's coming up on these 500 cubic inch machines. Oldsmobile near lane, Chevy Beretta far lane. Oh, this is a wonderful drag race. Whoa, who won it, you ask? Well, the fist in the air of the AC Delco crew should tell you that. It is Scott Jeffrey on 7.301. Bruce Allen runs 7.301. Both run 189. The margin of victory, 1/100th of a second.
And that's just exactly what Jeff Breon took at the starting line. 1/100th of a second advantage, and he held on to that. No gain, no loss as they go down track, side by side like they were tied together. Even the mile an hour was in 4/100ths of a mile an hour as they crossed the finish line.
Boy, here's some stats you'll seldom see in drag race or any other motorsport. Look at that. neither driver could possibly have known who won. All right, we move along. Pro Stock.
Drivers staging oh so carefully at the starting line, knowing the start is critical to this race, and Morgan's got the advantage. Riding with Darrell Alderman. Can he catch him? Yes, he does. Right before the finish line, Darrell Alderman moves into the finals for the third year in a row at the AC Delco Heartland Nationals. His time, 7:24 at over 189 miles an hour. Our instant replay can show you the advantage gained by Morgan in the Oldsmobile. Larry did what he had to do, and that was get the whole shot on Darrell Alderman. Nearly 0.08 of a second advantage. That gave Morgan the lead in the early going. But as they traveled down track, that lead diminished until just before the finish line. The Dodge in the near lane put on a burst of power to blast past Morgan and into the final round. The margin of victory at the finish line, 0.07 of a second.
Few moments. As our camera moves past the Oscars, the trophies awarded to the champions here at the Slick 50 Nationals, we zero in on the STP Pontiac of Ricky Smith. He has never won a national event title. Very sophisticated race cars. They are limited to 500 cubic inches displacement, 2 4-barrel carburetors, 2,350 pounds the minimum weight. The door comes open to help extricate the smoke out of the cockpit. Here in the near lane, the Oldsmobile Cutlass of the Cowboy. This is Mark Powick. That is Dave Butner, his crew chief, making a final check inside the race car. You know Mark Powick's got to be thinking about Ricky Smith. They don't call him Tricky Ricky for nothing. He is absolutely phenomenal with starting line reaction time. Powick the last to stage. The advantage, believe it or not, to Powick. Smith trying to charge on him, and look at that, just inches, and Mark Powick wins his first ever national event title. 7:23 at 189 miles an hour off the starting line. 0.44 of a second advantage in reaction time went to Mark Powick. But the elapsed time battle was won by Ricky Smith. He went 7:24 with a 6. Mark Powick went 7:28 with a 6. You know what the margin of victory was on the clock? 0.04 of a second. On the ruler, you measure it in inches.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you to meet the happiest man in the world.
Steve, you know, since '85 we've been running Pro Stock and never won a national event. And we finally put our own shop in, and my guys have worked hard, and we've got Dart Machinery behind us, and I'll tell you, they got this Freightliner Trucks Old Cutlass Supreme just flying, man.
You know, everybody thought Ricky Smith will get the whole shot. Wrong, you did.
I was ready. I wasn't driving real good today, but I know how I had to beat Ricky, and God, Lord help me. We finally got it, man. I'm just so happy. My mom and dad are here, and it's our day, man. I love it.
I saw you pacing around the pits with that clutch, but practicing.
Yeah, I was. You know, we didn't make a good run. The thing shook pretty good in second and third, and I got it around, but we got the win lane. That's all that matters. I just have one question for you. I didn't beat Forrest's record, did I? A runner-ups.
No, not quite. He'll hold that for a long time. Great job.
Thanks, Steve.
Woo!
And you don't think there's any emotion in these guys?
In that interview, it's good off the starting line, then it goes away, and then it becomes, well, the driver has got to handle that automobile. That's why they put a steering wheel in the end of that shaft. Here's a man that can do it. Larry Morgan up against Bob Glidden in the Pro Ford, the only Ford in Pro Stock racing. And Glidden is still looking to, well, impress even himself this year. The car's got steady performance with no more of that domination he enjoyed for almost 10 years.
Oh, absolutely. The winningest race driver in the history of NHRA Championship drag racing. But the last season or so, big problems, and he's still searching for the handle on that Ford Pro. However, he qualified fourth at a 7:22, which puts him in pretty good position here. Larry Morgan, well, he's qualified at number 5 at the same ET. So this ought to be a super race, Don Garlitz.
Again, it'll probably be decided right at the starting line, but Glidden is one of the best on starting line reactions, but Morgan is no slouch either. So the fans are getting ready to watch a really good Pro Stock race.
And down here in this part of the country, North Carolina, they indeed love these Pro Stock cars. They have every bit as many fans as the Nitro Burners. As Big said, it's a Ford Cobra Glidden. Over on the right side of your screen, left side of your screen is, and it's Bob Glidden away first. Morgan better have a ton of power. He's coming on. Cannot catch the Ford. Rusty Glidden says, finally, we're going to the final four. Glidden at 723, 192 miles an hour. A great job of race car driving, not just tuning.
As we watch this replay, we see that start advantage that Glidden gets when he leaves the line. Very unusual to beat Morgan that bad out of the gate. Glidden's car gives up a little ET in the middle of the course. That slick spot, it must have slipped just a little bit. Morgan gained somewhat on him, but not enough. Glidden's car again comes on with 192 and takes the win.
Well, Bob Glidden razor sharp up the starting line today. A whole shot. Your 23 beat his 22.
We're running so slow, that'd be about the only way we could win a race right now.
You've got the quickest elapsed time that survived so far this round, though.
Well, we've got another fast car yet to run.
Find out who he will face, and it's an all Oldsmobile, all Warren Johnson confrontation coming up. That's the boss, Warren Johnson, right there. That's his driver, Don Beverly, in the other white Oldsmobile Cutlass, unsponsored automobile at this point. So we'll see whether or not the employee is at work and beat up on the boss.
Well, I don't know if you can call him an employee, because it is Beverly paying Johnson to drive that car, and you can bet that he's not going to lay down not a whisker, Don Garlis, I don't think.
Well, as we look at the performance of the previous round, it looks like Johnson is a standout. 717 to Beverly 726, but you never know in drag racing.
Let's remember, there's no Winston points at stake, just money. Beverly skating around. Whoa! The Johnson team puts on one of the best races of the day. How about a 722 for Warren, winning it to a 724? Let the best man win. You weren't kidding. What a drag race, 22 to a 24.
It was a close race. Don was right there. I knew he would be because I own all that equipment.
But you had to beat him man on man.
That's exactly what it boiled down to. And Don's out here having fun, and I'm out here trying to make a living, and we're both working hard at it.
Well, you're going to work hard in the final.
Well, Don and I were here for one purpose, put our Oldsmobile in the final, and now we got one more step.
You seem to have the better handling race car. Ekman's is a real handful.
This track is tricky. Ekman's got an excellent handling race car on most tracks. This track is just a little tricky. All the field cars, all of us, we've all got problems, and whoever figures it out, hopefully will win.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
So we've got the players set in all the pro categories. We'll see who the winners are right after this.
The reason I say they might loosen it up a bit, if the clutch is too tight, you shot the tires, you get it loose. That's what happened to Ekman in qualifying. In fact, there is Jerry Ekman. He can leave here the points leader as he came if Ricky Smith could beat Warren Johnson. Remember, Ricky Smith has never won an NHRA national event. He's been runner-up 4 times. Ricky Smith is doing his job, a huge hole shot, 0.08 of a second. Ekman cheering him on. Warren Johnson, Ricky Smith loses a clutch right at the finish line, but I don't believe that was a factor. How about Warren Johnson 721 to a 730, and you couldn't pick him without an instant replay, Dick.
Boy, but watch that starting line advantage by Ricky Smith. Warren Johnson was just a little bit asleep on that one, and Ricky Smith certainly took advantage of it. And it looked like it was going to be all Smith as they motored down. But then the Warren Johnson engine began to come on as they neared the finish line. And it's just my opinion that a possibility that clutch in Smith's car started to give up a little bit earlier, allowing Johnson to just barely take the win.
Now, Ricky Smith had 800s off the starting line, but Warren Johnson had 900s in performance. Here you can see the difference. Whoa, what a race.
But that clutch coming out of Smith's car certainly had to be a factor, because we saw the sparks as the car crosses the finish line, but there was damage occurring prior to that, so that would slow Smith down just a little bit at the end. Once again, the clutch makes the final decision.
You weren't sure, though.
Yeah, it was by a mile.
Yeah, really? You needed all of a 721.
We felt we could run a 20 or a 21 in a final. We made some changes, kind of like we had run the 20 and the 21 in the evening sessions before. We felt Ricky's going to try every trick he knew, which that's why they call him Tricky Ricky, but his AC Delco Oldsmobile buried him.
He made you stage first. You were taking no chances on a red light or making a mistake up there.
No, I can stage first to last. That doesn't bother me at all. Some of these guys have to stage one way or the other, and it don't make a damn bit of difference to me.
You've won the Summer Nationals. You've taken the points title. What a weekend.
Perfect. Except for the 50,000.
Well, that was yesterday.
Well, you know what they say, Steve, you're only as good as your last run. So this is what the racers look at. What did my competitor run in the last round, not what they qualified at?
Absolutely. Okay, there is the Larry Morgan car. Winner this year of the Budweiser Pro Stock Challenge and $50,000 2 weeks ago in Englishtown, New Jersey. Here's Beverly in the near lane. Beverly away first. Here comes Morgan. Indeed, closest race of the day in any category it is. Don Beverly. A 770 defeats a quicker 768. Beverly had 200ths of a second off the starting line, 200ths difference at the finish line. You could call it a dead heat if you wanted to, but there's no such thing in drag racing. That computer's going to pick one car or the other, and it liked Don Beverly this time around.
It certainly did, and it was that starting line advantage is what Beverly needed, because he was off just enough to be the loser, but he made it up at the starting line, and here we see at the end just how close that race really was. If it wasn't for electronics, in the old days they'd have called that a dead heat.
This is for the championship. Drivers taking their time about staging. Howick in first. Now Morgan, and a giant advantage for Larry Morgan. In the near lane, he got out by some 600ths of a second over Howick, but Mark pulled it out. The margin of victory at the finish line, 6,000ths of a second. This is one of the closest Pro Stock races we've seen in some time, and Mark Howick has just won the Motorcraft Ford Nationals. Let's take a look at this one in replay. You can see the advantage gained by Larry Morgan. It was a huge 600ths of a second. Now, Howick had to hope that he had the horsepower to drive around Morgan, and he did. And he did it right in the final few feet. In the far lane, Howick, Oldsmobile just inches ahead. The margin of victory right there, 6,000ths of a second. Steve?
Mark Howick came around the turn hooting and a hollering. You had to run him down.
Steve, what a way to start out the second race of the year with our new sponsor, Summit Racing Equipment. I'm just so happy for them and for the guys, my parents, my fiance, everybody. I mean, everybody's worked so hard over the winter months, and it's paying off already.
In a 720, this car ran better all day long.
Woo! I knew I was on a run. You know, I was a little late in the final. It was a quick tree, and I wasn't ready for it, but it's a team effort. And when I'm up, sometimes the guys are a little down and vice versa, and they got me through today, boy, and I love it.
We love it for you.
Woo! I like it, man. Number three. Woo!
I just love the way Mark Howick celebrates.
The motors come up. Oh, a great start. It looked like one clutch pedal activated both cars. Oh, and what a finish. Bob Glidden, 724 with a 3. David Rampy, 724 with a 3. It was Glidden. Teeny-weeny hole shots that made the difference.
This is a perfect Pro Stock race. David Rampy, new to this kind of competition, but you wouldn't know it from this race, running against the master, Bob Glidden, in a perfect pass on the part of both drivers. Boy, did we need the electronic guy to figure out who won this one. Look at that finish.
Bob, if you knew for sure who won that one, you have a sixth sense about these things.
Well, I knew, Steve, because I saw my wind light come on the side of the track.
That's unfair. They shouldn't have that out there. I like to tell you, 724, 1,000th of a second was the difference.
It was a close race. It was a great race. Matter of fact, for me, it was a great race. It might not have been quite that great for David, but it's a good race.
Right. They're both pre-staged, neither one in a hurry to make that final move. Both would like to stage last. Warren Johnson breaks first. Jeffrey is up to the pressure. He leaves first. Jeffrey is right there. Through no fault of Scott Jeffrey, Warren Johnson and the Oldsmobile win the U.S. Nationals back-to-back. 7:16, 193 miles an hour.
There's no question this is the race of the day so far. They both get outstanding starts, but Jeffrey On was just a little bit faster at the start, and that gave him the early lead. At mid-track, Warren Johnson creeps from behind and just barely nips Scott Jeffrey On. This is what 1/1000th of a second looks like as Warren Johnson wins his second consecutive U.S. National Championship. Here's Steve with the win.
That was one of the closest Pro Stock finals in history. Thousandths of a second between you two.
Perfect. It really hurts them then.
I've never seen you this pumped up.
Oh, to win a second one in a row, I mean, this is the greatest thing. I mean, this GM Performance Parts, Ray Best's Oldsmobile, and we're so damn happy, I can't believe it.
We're happy for you, Warren.
Oh, thanks.
And Warren Johnson lengthens his already huge lead.
This one could be one right on the starting line, David.
It sure could, and both of them good leavers. Jeffrey On, of course, now with a teammate. The big question is, on everybody's mind, how is the return of Darrell Alderman going to affect Scott Jeffrey On? The interesting thing to note, Larry Morgan, as you saw on our inboard camera, uses a button, like Steve told us earlier. He's got an air shifter. Watch. Bang, bang, bang. Every time he hits it, a gear change.
Dueling in-car cameras, and it is Jeffrey On by 0.003 of a second, 7:14 to a 7:15.
Steve, a very slight advantage in the thousandths of a second was gained off the starting line by Larry Morgan. Watch the car in the far lane. If you pick it up, you got better eyes than I do. He and Scott Jeffrey On dueled it out all the way down the racetrack with Morgan pushing the button and Jeffrey On pulling the levers. These two Pro Stockers streak to the finish line where the big speed by Jeffrey On made the difference. He ran over 195 miles an hour. Morgan was at 193.
Scott came out saying, well, that was a close race. 0.003 difference.
Yeah, the bottom line is, though, is we got that wind light, and from Mopar and the guys from Wayne County, I'll tell you, they've been working so hard over this winter, and we've been putting some good mile an hour up on the scoreboard this weekend. We're enjoying it, I'll tell you.
You may need a few hundreds, though. That 14, I don't know.
Well, you know, we'll just take them one round at a time. Believe me, I got the best in the business back in my pit area.
Riding with Jeffrey On. Now you're with Alderman. Look at this, side by side. And at the finish line, it's just inches that separate the two, and Scott Jeffrey On has defeated Darrell Alderman. The times, don't look at your screen, listen to me, 7:11 for both drivers. Let's watch it again in replay. Scott Jeffrey On got oh so slight an advantage. Darrell Alderman tried to keep pace, and he did. As you saw on our in-car camera during the run, it was side-by-side racing all the way to the finish line until Scott Jeffrey On crossed it first. The margin of victory, 0.006 of a second. So Scott Jeffrey On has upset the #1 qualifier to win Pro Stock.
Well, Scott Jeffrey On down here in the dirt, but who cares, buddy? You won it.
Oh, it didn't matter. It was a tight drag race down through there, and you know they don't come any better in this business. You know, I've tried to do a lot of things out here in drag racing as far as driving, and I've styled a lot of my driving after the guy who just happens to be my teammate. I consider him and Lee Shepard to be the best that there ever was in this game.
You done dodged him to death.
Well, I don't know what happened. It was all for the guys at Wayne County, all these Mopar fans. I wanted to do it for my dad. He's been down in the dumps a little bit lately, and he knows I love him. And I'll tell you what, I had a dear friend here pass away in Phoenix about 2 months ago, and his name was Mr. Tom Demby, and this one's for Tom. I told him I was going to do it for Tom.
You both ran 7:11. You must have left first.
Well, that's all that counts.
This is Butch Abbott. Here's a guy that for race after race failed to qualify. But as soon as he acquired some power, basically from a leased engine out of the Steve Schmidt engine shop in Indianapolis, it is Butch Abbott in the show. Jim Yates, though, is running very good with his Dynamax Pontiac. Qualified 5th at a 7:21. Beat Tim Freeman in the first round. Abbott actually qualified better. 7:21 in the #4 spot and beat Terry Adams in the first round. Just like we saw in funny car competition, the advantage off the starting line can be the difference between winning and losing. And that's why each of the drivers will stage ever so carefully. One, to get a good start, but two, maybe to gain a psychological advantage. tremendous race, and from behind, Jim Yates and his Dynamax Pontiac rips off a 7:23 at 190, and he needed every bit of it. The margin of victory at the finish line, a scant 5 thousandths of a second, because the advantage at the starting line went to Butch Abbott. He just drilled Yates on the Christmas tree, and as they passed this position, had a very slight lead. But that didn't last long, because here came Yates. As he neared the finish line, Yates in the Pontiac was able to claw his way up alongside and then ahead by just inches to take the lead and go to the semifinals. Steve?
I know you'd like better, but all I have for you is a 7:23.
Well, that's pretty good. That's what we run last round, I tell you, and it's a lot hotter and nastier out there. I think it'll be pretty good for this session.
Any difference in lanes for the Pro Stock cars? We see a lot of changing up there.
We switched over to the left, from the left the first round to the right the second round. There seems to be a little bump out there, but we like the starting line a lot more.
And Jim Yates is certainly noted for using the starting line to his advantage. Butch Abbott over to offer his congratulations.
Pro Stock engines. In the Rusty Glidden car is a motor built by his brother Billy out of just scrap and spare parts from around the shop. They've experimented. It's no longer a Hemi headboard. It's strictly a wedge. Let's see what happens. Rusty's been having a ball driving this car, shouting and screaming as only he can. Oh, and Schmidt just drills Glidden off the mark. Incredible reaction time. Can Rusty catch him? Oh my. That was 2 thousandths of a second between them. 7:15 beats a 7:10.
3 runs in a row. Rusty Glidden runs 7:10, but the string runs out. When he is laid off the starting line, you could see the Dynagear Rosemobile Cutlass of Steve Schmidt get the advantage by nearly 500ths of a second. That amount of time, some 500ths of a second, was the advantage performance-wise that Glidden enjoyed with the Ford. But as they neared the finish line, our CompuLink timing system separated the two, and 2 thousandths of a second, margin of victory to Schmidt.
Steve the Snake Schmidt. What a hole shot that was.
Well, my guys were a little concerned. He had a 413 light last round, and I told him, don't worry about it. He's just a kid. The old man can handle him.
Scott in the far lane was put there by Darrell, who had a 100th of a second better elapsed time in the previous round. That earned him the lane choice. The 500 cubic inch wedge dodges in a great side-by-side race. And at the finish line, Darrell Alderman just barely squeezes by. 1 thousandth of a second, the difference in the two elapsed time. 7/10s a pair. 194 for Alderman, 195 for Jeffrey on. Watch this race in replay. The advantage off the starting line was 8 thousandths of a second, and it went to Darrell Alderman. I mean, we are at the very best level of competition when you put these two guys side by side, and the times prove it. At the finish line, 1 thousandth of a second separated them. The margin of victory was 9 thousandths of a second as Alderman drove past him in the final few inches to take the win and move to the finals.
They're talking to each other with the throttles. They're going to run out of gas. Whoa, who do you think won it? Nope, you're wrong. Mark Powick won it in the near lane. A 7:09 beats Morgan's 7:13. Powick 196 miles an hour. Maybe Morgan could have got it, except he got a little out of the groove at the far end, Ralph.
Big hole shot for Larry Morgan, of 452 to a 498 reaction time, but the difference came at the far end of the racetrack. Mark Powick got the Summit machine up on its tires and moving all the way through the speed traps at the far end. A 196 mile an hour pass with a 7:09 for Mark Powick. It betters a 7:13 at 194 for Morgan. Here's how you figure out the margin of victory. The elapsed time plus the reaction time gives you your total time. You subtract it. 1/1000th of a second was the difference, Steve.
Folks, you might want to get back from your television sets. The Cowboy may come right into your living room.
Woo-hoo! I love it, Steve. That's for all the people at Summit Racing Equipment in Akron, Ohio. They've been supporting us through thick and thin, and proud to be here in the final, man. It's a great race to do with that.
You had to chase Morgan down.
figured he left on me a little bit, but I was coming, and I just hoped that Dave Butner and the crew had enough steam in this baby, and they did.
7:09.
Two of the best engine builders drag racing has ever known. They both do their own, Johnson and Schmidt. Johnson likes to stage last. So does Schmidt. WJ's in. Here's Stevie. Could it get any better than this? All right, who won? The electronic finish line judge said Steve Schmidt beat Warren Johnson. They both run 7:06. The second race in a row with identical elapsed times.
The difference for this one was a hole shot for Steve Schmidt. A 4:65 reaction time to a slower 4:76 for Warren Johnson. As they got down through the racetrack, it was a 7:06 for both of them. Johnson was 1 mile an hour faster, but the difference, 0.06 of a second when they came to the far end of the racetrack and got to the yellow line right there. 0.06 of a second put Steve Schmidt into the finals against Jerry Ekman.